What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Brushfire Project. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be going over how to properly install a rifle scope on a precision rifle. Let's get into it. All right, guys, so the rifle we're going to be working with today is an 18-inch BCM SPR upper. We're going to be putting a Vortex Strike Eagle 3-18 on it. It's more than enough glass for this rifle. This is going to be a sub 600 meter rifle, and this is kind of a mid-low tier glass, but I've had good luck with them in the past, so we're going to throw that on there. The mount we're going to be using is a LaRue QD mount. I've had good luck with these in the past, and I've always found them to be a true return to zero QD. So if I did ever have to break this rifle down, taking the scope off, putting it back on, I wouldn't have any concerns or issues with return to zero. I could be confident that it's going to have a good return to zero. I'm not going to have to worry about double checking that. Also going to be throwing on a Vortex bubble level, arguably our most important piece of gear for precision shooting other than our optic and our mount. Some other tools we've got here, we've got our flashlight, we've got some fix-it sticks, and we have our plumb line here. And of course, we've got our Alp. Today's flavor is chilled mint. So let's throw in a lip pillow and we'll get started. All right, first things first, we're going to start with the mount. We're going to throw the mount on, and then from there, we're going to get our scope set in, and we're going to get our eye relief set. So setting in the scope, a couple things to think about. This is whether you're using a one-piece mount or rings. You want to make sure that your mount is as far forward as possible. So you hear that click? So you want to make sure it's all the way against whatever T-slot those recoil lugs are sitting in. That way, after you've zeroed and mounted your scope and everything, if there were to be any slight amount of movement, then you're not going to have to worry about the recoil impulse is always going to drive that mount forward, and so you're not going to have to worry about a shifting zero if you were to have a slight bit of slop in there, and you zeroed, and then the next day you go out and you're shooting and you found your zero is just slightly off. This will mitigate that. So make sure it's all the way forward before you crank it down. This one's easy. Just got a QD levers here, and we're good to go. As far as where to start with your mount, when you're talking about eye relief, a good place to start is generally right here. Putting the mount almost all the way forward, but leaving maybe one, sometimes two of these little T-slots on the top rail in front of that mount. That should set you up in a decent starting point. You may have to make adjustments after that, but I found that to be a pretty good rule of thumb. So next, we'll just take off these two pieces and we're going to set the scope in. I like to keep all of my rings the same way they came from the manufacturer. So if these two sets of rings came from the manufacturer on the rear slot, I try to keep them there, and I try to keep track of that. If this is the right ring for this slot, the forward slot, I like to keep it on the right side. Probably doesn't make much of a difference, but it makes me feel a little bit better, and I like to just keep everything same. Figure the guys at the manufacturer probably know best there, and there might be some reason to it, or maybe not. Maybe I'm just OCD. So now I'm going to just gently tighten these screws just enough to keep the scope roughly in place while we get our eye relief. You don't have to crank down on them at all. This is literally, it's going to be nice and loose in here so that we can move the scope around as much as needed when we're getting our eye relief and setting it up before we level. So the bottom ones, I'll go ahead and tighten down pretty tight because they're going to cinch against the mounting block on the actual body of the mount. And so these ones, you don't have to be quite as particular with. You can tighten them down all the way. And then the top rings for this particular mount are the ones that will actually be really sure we get a good proper torque on. If you're using a more traditional mount that has just 2 top rings and it's kind of got a cradle, this is a little bit less important. You'll just tighten both sides of the screws down until you feel like it's in a decent place, but you can still manipulate the scope a little bit. So that's kind of a little quirk for the little room mounts here. So now we've got these tightened, and let's see, yep, so we can still move it nice and easy to get our eye relief. All right, when it comes to eye relief, I prefer to do my eye relief and set my eye relief when I'm in a kneeling or even a standing position, because I find the times that I'm shooting prone are pretty rare, unless I'm zeroing or I'm doing some really long distance shooting, which I'm probably not going to do with a 5.56. I am almost always, whether it's hunting or practical shooting, competition, you're almost always going to be in some kind of position other than prone. So I'll get into a kneeling position here. I'm going to just set up, get a nice cheek weld, and I'm going to start messing with my eye relief. Another thing to think about is you want to have your magnification set to the max magnification of that optic, because as you go up in magnification, you're also making your eye box a little bit less forgiving. And so you could set your eye relief all the way down here on 3x, where you have a really forgiving eye box, and think, okay, cool, I'm good to go. And then you crank everything down, level your scope, all that good stuff, and then you crank up your magnification, and you're like, holy crap, I've got a bunch of scope shadow in there, and that can be really frustrating. So crank up your magnification all the way, and that'll put your scope kind of in the position of least advantage for the optics and the glass and all that stuff. And whenever you go down to a lower magnification, your eye box will be perfect. So I'll get on here. There's a couple thoughts to this. So one of them is that you want a little bit of scope shadow. That can help if you're if you don't want to have to be religious about adjusting your parallax after every shot or changing distances. But I prefer to have a little bit more crisp of a view. So I set mine where I have a whole good crisp edges on my whole field of view inside the scope, and I just have to make sure I'm really good about changing my parallax to match my target distance. If you have scope shadow, then you can just make sure you have equal shadow all the way around your scope, and make sure your reticle is centered up in that, and you'll be good to go. But again, that's just personal preference. You do you. So I'm going to set this where I got a nice crisp picture right about there. And then I'm going to come up, I'm going to lift my head off the gun, I'm going to close my eyes and get my cheek weld again, open my eyes, and see how my picture looks. I'm going to do that a couple times. And if everything looks the same, then I know I have a good natural eye relief that is going to be optimal for whatever position I might get into. If I get comfortable behind the gun and I come behind it, I'm not going to have to move my head around and all that stuff to get that good clear picture. So that's how we're going to set our eye relief, and we're just going to take a note of the distance here so that we can make sure we're close to it. We'll check it again here in just a little bit. So that's eye relief. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and throw our level on before we start actually leveling the scope, just so that once we start cranking things down, we already have this piece set and we're not having to adjust the scope or move it around or anything like that to get this on here, because you do need a little bit of extra wiggle room. So that's about where that needs to be. I'm going to double check my eye box and my eye relief one last time. Still looks good. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and level the scope. All right. So before we actually level up the scope, I'm going to level the action. And I'm just going to use these little machinist levels to do that. I'm just going to throw one here on the upper receiver, butt it all the way up to the scope mount, like so. And I'm going to make sure that's as level as I can get it. Now, there is another method. There's actually a few methods for leveling a scope. I'm showing you the one that I like the best because I've found it to work really well across a variety of platforms with different qualities of glass. So another one that you've probably heard of is using shims to, it's actually a leveling shim or wedge that you place underneath the body of the scope, and like kind of in between the body of the scope and the mount or the receiver, and it will level the body of the scope perfectly to the action. And those are great as long as your optic is of sufficient quality. Your Night Forces, your Leupold Mark V line, your Vortex Razor line, those are all, I would absolutely trust that. For something that's a little bit lower quality like this optic, or some of your Athlons, or scopes kind of in that price range, I've found occasionally that the reticle will not be perfectly calibrated to the body of the scope. Not sure why, but it has happened to me in the past. So this is a method that will alleviate that issue and make sure that my reticle is perfectly level to my bubble level and to the gun, regardless of any machining imperfections in the optic itself. So now that we've got that level on there, we've got our eye relief set, we have our level loosely on here, we're going to take the flashlight and we're going to shine it through the objective lens, which will project an image of the reticle onto the wall. So you can see that right here. So here's our plumb line, here's our reticle, and our rifle is level. So now we're just going to take and we're going to rotate the scope in the mount until we get it perfectly level with that plumb, or perfectly in sync with that plumb line, like so. Now we'll double check our level on the gun. That looks good. And we'll start to tighten down some of these screws. When you do this, you need to be really careful to alternate your which screws you're tightening down, because as you tighten them down, you'll actually cause a little bit of torque on the body of the scope, and it can rotate the scope tube a little bit, causing your scope to come out of level. So I'm going to go just a little bit, just kind of almost finger tight here, and then I'm going to double check my action level, and I'm going to recheck my reticle level. So that still looks good, and I'm going to do it again. Now I'll do this 2 or 3 times just to make sure that everything is tightening up and staying level as I go. Once I get to a certain point, I'll throw my actual torque bit on here so that I can get to the proper 25 inch-pounds of torque. So we're going to go up to 15 right now, and we'll check it again. All right, check our level, still looks good. Check our reticle, and that looks good as well. So now we'll go up in a little bit more increments up until we get to 25. Just going one side at a time, kind of alternating. There we go. All right, we'll check it again. Action still level. Check the reticle. And the reticle looks level. Cool. Now we'll just make sure that these bottom screws are also properly torqued. They shouldn't need much because they're already butted up against the body of the mount, but it's good to make sure everything is torqued down equally. So now we've got our scope level to the reticle, or we've got a reticle level to the plumb line and to the body of the receiver. Once you've done the rear one, you don't have to take quite as much time on the front one. You still want to alternate on your screws, but this scope is locked in. It's not going anywhere. If this one came completely loose, this one would still hold it in place. So now we're going to go ahead and tighten these up just alternating.
All right, so now our scope is nice and tight. We're all locked in. We don't have to worry about it moving or anything like that. Next thing we'll do is level the actual bubble level to the reticle. All right, so now that we have our scope tightened down, we're going to go ahead and level the actual bubble level, which we'll be referencing in the field, and make sure that that is perfectly calibrated to the vertical axis of our reticle. You can actually shoot technically out to long range with a scope that is canted in relation to the rifle itself. But if your actual scope level that you're referencing in the field is not properly calibrated, you will have a lot of issues. So you just need to make sure that your level is properly calibrated so that no matter what your situation is, the reticle is always going to be plumb, so that at distance you're not having any offset. Otherwise you'll have left and right misses. Most of your misses at distance are going to be two things: wind and you're out of level. And a lot of the ones that you think you're missing from wind, if you don't have a properly set up bubble level, are actually going to be because your rifle is canted. It looks right to your eye, but it's actually a little bit canted one way or the other, and so you can induce windage misses due to that. So we're gonna get this thing set up pretty close. It's also important to note, with this specific level or any level that's using an actual air bubble, you want to set it so that you have a little bit of, it's actually canted just a little bit in the beginning, because as you tighten this screw down, it will cinch this level down just a little bit and it will shift where that bubble is actually at. So for now, let's see, my reticle is perfectly plumb, and my bubble is touching the left line in this vial. So now I'm going to go ahead and tighten it down a little bit, and we're going to see if it moves. If it doesn't, that's not a big deal. We'll just start back kind of from scratch, and that'll be just fine. So now we've got that tightened down a little bit. We're going to get the bubble as perfectly level as we can, and we're going to double check our reticle. That is pretty darn perfect. I might be able to adjust it a little bit, but I would probably not actually get it closer than it already is. I'd probably mess it up more than it is. That is one disadvantage to levels of this type. They are very sensitive, and it can be kind of a pain to get that bubble set perfectly in there. A couple other options that you have are electronic levels, which are great, but they're pretty expensive. And the other one would be a bead level, something like the ones from Accuracy First. Those are my favorite kind because they actually have graduation marks for different amounts of cant. So you can technically shoot with a canted rifle as long as you know how canted your rifle is, so that you can compensate for it. And those bead, it's just like a little ceramic bead suspended in liquid, and it uses gravity to just help you know where your rifle is at in relation to the ground. But this is one that I had right now laying around, so this is what we're going to use, and they do work just fine. So now our bubble level is calibrated to our reticle. Our scope itself and the reticle is calibrated and level to in relation to the rifle itself, and we are level, torqued down properly, and ready to go zero. All right, guys, and there you have it. That's my method for setting up a rifle scope, getting everything leveled and properly torqued down. Hope you found this interesting. If you have any other videos or any other topics you'd like me to cover in the future, please leave a comment down below. We'll get back to you, and we'll hopefully get that content out to you.
Let me know what your favorite methods are for leveling your scopes and setting stuff up. Maybe there's something I haven't heard of, and I'd love to try it. So hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.